to be here today and to speak to you all. I'm sorry for facing my back to my one talks here. So I'm an artist. I've been living here in Melbourne for the last 20 years. I was hoping that my other bio would be read out, but that's okay. That was the very academic version, and I wanted something that was a bit more grounded and grassroots. So I wanted to, that's okay. I wanted to start with by saying that I was born in Rabaul, and I crawled around in my local village up until the age of about 2 or 3. Can you guys hear me okay? That's better. And my mum often told me that she would bring me to the garden in a billum, and she would hang me from the tree and while she worked. And so I have that beautiful memory that mum has shared with me. And for those of you who don't know, my mum is here, Kathy, who's over there. So I don't really have anything kind of planned to talk about. It was more just, I kept thinking about like this break the bias, and what does it mean? And so I just thought I would just talk about, I guess, my journey as an artist and what I've done to overcome biases that many of the women have already shared today. Like just even listening to their stories was just like, oh yeah, I know that one and that one. And so I grew up in Brisbane with my siblings. I moved to Melbourne when I was 19 by myself because I wanted to pursue a career in the arts, and I didn't know how I was going to do that. I just knew I wanted to do it. And arts for me is like a way to continue to practicing my culture, my Papua New Guinean and Australian culture. And so arts was like this platform to still be able to do that in an Australian context. And I started, I'll keep the story short because I know we're limited on time, but I started by doing an arts degree. I did a Bachelor of Arts at RMIT University, which is here in the city. And then that kind of led me to my first exhibition, which I actually did end up exhibiting here at Footscray Community Arts. And so that was based on a Tolai cultural practice of Aikira, which I think some of you might know. And travelled around Australia with mum and my son, cooking Aikira for everyone. And so that was basically Papua New Guinean food, Tolai traditional food, and just so you know, the work that's kind of being presented is just some examples of the artworks that I currently have on show. I have 2 exhibitions here in Melbourne and another one in Berlin. So that's just there to give you information. So if any of you want to go to my shows, that's where you can see my artwork right now. Because I rarely have exhibitions in Melbourne. It's usually always interstate or overseas. So I've worked across Pacific community here in Melbourne for a long time. I co-founded the Pacific Women's Weaving Circle. I helped create the Contemporary Pacific Arts Festival, which was actually started here at Footscray Community Arts Centre, and that ran for 3 years, and that was an amazing event that involved the Pacific community of largely Melbourne, mostly the western suburbs. I've done filmmaking projects with Solomon Islander youth, with Pacific Islander youth in Melbourne, and so it was always had a focus on working with community, and that was really, really beneficial for me, particularly being a single parent. And it was after I had my first solo exhibition that I realised that I was in an abusive relationship. And that also stemmed from like childhood family violence, and that I was just perpetuating these cycles. And it was like, why did I get into a relationship with a man who was abusing alcohol, was treating me like crap? And I didn't want that to continue with my son. I was like, no, this has actually got to stop with me. And I walked away from that relationship, and then my career just blossomed. It was not easy, but it was really, really tough. And I can, stand here today proudly and say that I've created the life that I want to live. And I pursued a career in the arts, and no one in my family really knew what that was, and most of my siblings still don't know. They don't even know how to tell people what I do. But I like to say that I use my arts practice to communicate histories that are overlooked or lesser known, and that's usually Papua New Guinean women's histories. So currently, the work that I have, I just came back from Germany. I was there for a fellowship. I've been doing some work with the German Maritime Museum. I've been researching the colonial history of Papua New Guinea. And for those of you who don't know, Rabaul, where I'm from, was the capital of Papua New Guinea. And there's a lot of colonial history still that exists, and I think stuff that we are not even aware of. Like there's a lot of communities, like the Unserdeutsch community that live in Brisbane, who created their own language because of the German colonial history. And that's there's an image of 3 photographs, and it's a Tolai woman, Yawarawakai, and a German man, and his name is Albert Hall. And so Albert Hall was the second governor of Papua New Guinea, and he essentially helped build Rabaul as it is today. So it was the Germans that built Rabaul. And he took a Tolai wife and had a child with her, and not much is known about them. And so I remember coming across this photograph. It'll come up, you'll see it, it's got orange text. I remember coming across this photograph years ago and looking at it, and it was always labelled Albert Hull and his Tolai wife and child. And I thought, she was more than just his wife. Always more than just his wife. And so I remember my mom coming to me and a lot of the Tolai women community saying, you need to find out this woman's name. Who is she? You know, and we always want to know who we're related to. Who are the people, you know, in our community, so we can understand if we're related to them or connected to them, or, you know, if they're our kin or relatives. So I ended up doing a lot of research, and research is a big part of my creative process. And so I spent a lot of time in archives and reading and trying to find out little bits of information. And over time, and sometimes it takes years, I end up putting it all together, and then I create an artwork, and it kind of communicates all of that. And so there's 3 images. I'm waiting for it to go to the next slide. Maybe it's ended. I'll just hang a sec. I will just skip to it. This one. So I'll just pause it. There we go. So there's 3 images. I'm talking about this one in particular because this is the latest work that I've made, and it's in 3 different languages. German, Unserdeutsch, and English. And so the first work I made was to basically state her name. Her name is Yawarawakai, don't forget that. And it was more about ensuring that these archives that hold our visual histories, which are all across Europe, are here in Australia. Write down our names. You know, we're not just a woman or a native or a servant. We're more than that. And it's just about rehumanizing our narratives and our histories. And I just wanted to give a bit more understanding of who this woman was, because still today no one really knows who she is. And no one knows who the child is. And Governor Hull essentially did not write anything about her in his memoirs of Rabaul. And then when he built his status, he sent for a European wife, and then they went off and had children. And Yawarawakai and the child would discreetly return to their village. That's what happened. That's what happened historically. So I often look at history and think about how does that continue to play out today? Because it's always, our present is always informed by the past. The FMI Sisters of Vunupope was a previous work that I made, and it was about giving a voice and history to Papua New Guinean women during the Second World War. Because if you look at Australia's war history, it's always about Australian men winning this and Australian men doing that, and, you know, Papua New Guineans were just there to kind of help carry stuff, and, you know, and if we didn't abide by the Australians, and the Japanese kind of would kill us, or, you know, we got caught in the middle of that war, Second World War. It wasn't our war. And there was this little known story about the FMI Sisters and how they essentially kept all the missionaries and the European and Australian civilians alive for 3 years in a prisoner of war camp. They risked their lives every day to bring them food, and they kept them alive. You know, the Japanese said, you're free, you can wander around, do whatever you want. But they said, no, we love our God, we actually love the people who we're working for and serving for, and we're going to keep them alive. And it was just show the humanity of Papua New Guinean women and who they are, and the Papua New Guinean women that I know. I don't know these media stories that, you know, we get to see on TV of, like, women being, killed and the sorcery, like that is such an exploited story, and it's not every single Papua New Guinean woman's story. It's not. And that's what we get flooded with in the Australian media, and we're not all Papua New Guinean women, we're not all victims. Like, we're actually really powerful and empowered women. And I'm very grateful to my mum, because she brought us to Australia to have a better life, to get an education. And I hear that so many times with the other women, just talking about how important education is, and I cannot emphasize that enough. I'm one generation away from the village, and I've come from a matrilineal society where my own mum didn't even get to finish primary school, and here I am about to complete the highest level of education. And so I just feel like I'm living my mum's dreams, but also my own dreams. I guess I don't really want to focus on problems. I just want to focus on achievements and how we can get through those. But I think, because I feel like a lot of women have already mentioned a lot of the biases that we all endure and experience. I like to use my arts practice to sort of speak out about taboo topics, things that that we don't often talk about. And I think working with the PNG Women's Association of Victoria is a really important process for me to stay connected to PNG community here, and particularly as now that I'm looking at, I have a very, very clear focus of looking at PNG women historically and contemporarily. So, and that took time to sort of get there, in terms of looking at museum collections, and understanding that museum collections are gendered. Like, if you look at museum collections today, particularly from Papua New Guinea, a lot of the objects in there are actually to do with men. There's very little objects in museums or cultural treasures that relate to women, in terms of the things that we made. And that has to do with the gendered history of anthropology and academia. There were a few female anthropologists, but a large number of anthropologists were men, and they only collected things that belonged to men. My master's project was looking at the tolai midi, which is this regal body adornment, and that was only worn by men of high status, and because there was hardly anything in there to do with women. And so I had to navigate that as a tolai woman. I got permission from the elders to actually do that work, and I was always getting asked, always getting asked the gendered questions, like, well, are you allowed to do this? And it's like, well, I wouldn't be doing this research if I didn't get permission. Like, why would I do that? And what gives you, and these were mostly non-Papua New Guinean people, what gives you the right to even question that, like the cultural protocols? You don't even know what the cultural protocols are. And so there's lots of challenges in education, in academia, if there's any of you young people, or mature age people who want to actually go back and do studies. It's not an easy space for us. A lot of academic and educational institutions aren't geared towards what we're interested in. After my first bachelor's degree, I was just taught everything about Western art and nothing about Papua New Guinean culture. And so what I did was I got on a plane. I wrote a grant, set up my own residency with the University of Goroka, contacted Michael Mel, and I just spent 4 weeks up in the Highlands. When I was pregnant with my son, and everyone was like, "Don't go, what are you doing? Don't go." And I was like, "No, I'm going. Like, I was born in Papua New Guinea. Why can't I go there as a pregnant woman?" And so I did, and I went there for 4 weeks, and I got my cultural art historical teachings. I did it myself. I had to do it myself because, art school doesn't teach that here. What do I want to finish up on? So I think the key things that I've, experienced in terms of bias have been, this is not easy to say. Being mixed race in Papua New Guinean community is not easy. I suffer discrimination from, white people. And I also suffer discrimination from people in my own community. I get called Mrs. or I'm not black enough. or I don't know my culture, and there's a lot of lateral violence that I experience, and I don't say anything because usually a lot of the one talk to my community do come around, they realise that the error of their ways, and just to kind of over kind of think or overlook that I don't have a cultural understanding or even know, like, you know, basic things like how to scratch a coconut or crack a coconut. Like, I know how to do that stuff. Just, you know, little things like that. I think there's a lot of assumptions, and that I don't have a voice as a mixed race woman in Papua New Guinean society. And so I have to be very careful around what conversations I step into or add my voice to. As a woman, as a Papua New Guinean woman, as a woman of colour, I'm not allowed to be too ambitious. You're not allowed to. Don't you overachieve. You just stay in your box over there. Don't be too smart. Don't be too outspoken. Like, I've always been the opposite of that, and I'm always being told to stay in my place, or, you know, you can only achieve to this point. And I say, screw that, because if I just listened to everyone, then I would just be betraying myself. Yeah, and so that's really important for me to never ever listen. In fact, when people tell me that I can't do something, it actually just gives me more motivation to do it. So, thanks. And I guess the other bias that I experience is just being a sole parent, and I don't really see sole parenting as sole parent. I feel like I'm a double parent because I'm doing twice the work, and I'm really grateful that I can call on my mum, you know, to come and help me care for my son, you know, so that I can go and do work, you know. And there's an amazing Pacific and I guess multicultural performance group called Hot Brown Honeys. They're an amazing group of Pacific, Indigenous and African women, and they have this slogan. It's called "The revolution will not happen without childcare." And it's so true. I can't do my work without childcare. Like, I really can't. And so, thanks, Mum, for looking after my Mangi Law, 4 weeks, Namigo Law, Germany. And, you know, doing all the work there that I needed to do. So thanks, Mum. Yeah, I can't do what I do without the beautiful encouragement, love and support from Papua New Guinean women and men that I've had in my community. And I'm so grateful that I've had a very culturally grounded upbringing, even in Australia, through my mum and through all of the PNG women. And some of the most comforting sounds to me, from childhood, are listening to PNG women talk late into the night. And I'm just going to finish it there. Yeah, I think it's really wonderful to have this back, and I'm really grateful to speak today. So follow your dreams. Don't listen to anyone that says you can't do anything. Just do it anyway.